So Bob, if you could give us a brief introduction. Looks like we got a few more folks joining us here as well, and we'll get going.
Awesome. Kevin, are you out of Nashville?
Yes, actually Murfreesboro, but yes, I'm in the Nashville area.
Okay.
Is that you too, Marcia?
I am.
What's happening, neighbor?
Nothing much. Trying to beat the heat, stay inside.
All right.
All right. There we go. I just requested your connection on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Yep. All right. It's all yours.
All right. Well, so Bob, if you could do a quick introduction of who you are to anyone here who doesn't know you already.
Okay. Yeah, I can make it quick. So I've been on the internet forever, like 40 years plus. And what drove me, and I'm a vet, I'm Navy, worked for Alexander Haig and for NATO back in the, okay, now you get to date me. Let's put it this way, I got out of the service in 1971 or 1972.
Oh, wow.
Yep. So I'm not a youngster.
Well, you look good.
Well, thank you. I try to act good. So anyway, I've run lots of networking groups. Years ago, I used to run a networking group out of West LA, and we used to have a lot of attendance to that group, which was always interesting. But as the world changes, things change. Everything's gone to Zoom now, right? How many face-to-face networking events are any of you participating in?
I've done quite a few over the last several years, but I do probably just as many, if not more, via Zoom.
Yeah, I live on Zoom. I used to do face-to-face meetings as well. But when COVID hit, then everybody went remote. And the guy that started Zoom must have made a gold mine based on
I'm sure
mishaps, the health issue. By the way, my whole family's medical, except for me. I'm a medical, So wife is a patient advocate. Daughter's got a doctorate in psychology. My son works in trauma at Mayo Clinic in Scottsdale. So anytime I come up with something intelligent that I think is intelligent to say about medical, they just tell me to shut up. But we're all here. Look, why are you here? Tell me why you're here. I'd love to hear it. Anybody want to go first?
I'll take a crack at it. Well, I was invited by Mr. Zumwalt, and I saw that it was not Mr. Zumwalt, sorry. I saw that Mr. Schroeder, sorry. But I saw that this was something for veterans, and I'm like, let me just get on here and see what is going on or how I can assist, and that's why I'm here.
Are you a veteran?
I am.
Oh, okay. Just checking.
Yes, sir.
What branch?
The Army.
Okay. Well, you look young, so I'm not going to ask.
Oh no, I'm not that young. I am 40, 48, soon to be 49.
Okay.
Yeah.
Making it another year, huh?
So let's go ahead and we got 6 minutes left, 5 minutes left in this intro period. Bob, let me keep us on track here, but my name is Dennis Schroeder. Live in Middle Tennessee, just a little bit north of Nashville. Been 24 years Army. I was a medical service corps officer. Started the nonprofit, the Price of Freedom Foundation, 5 years ago. We've got our very first event happening 4 weeks from tomorrow in San Diego, where we'll be presenting that book to the family of Afonso Abdelmamus, who was lost at sea in October of 1998. And I'm going to ask Marcia to introduce yourself, please, and then we'll move on quickly to the others so we can get Kevin's story started.
Really quick, my name is Marsha Jamont. I am a veteran. It's not a whole lot to me. I have 2 sons. They're 28, 27, and 28. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right.
I'm here and I live in Clarksville, Tennessee.
All right. Excellent. Thank you for being here. Let's see, I think Austin came in next. Austin, are you able to join us via voice, or are you just in listen only mode? I know Austin works in Washington, D.C., and frequently he can only join us in listen only mode. So
Okay.
not hearing anything from him at this moment. Let me go over to Tony Riggs. Could you give us a quick introduction?
Tony Riggs, 6 years in the Marine Corps. I'm an entrepreneur by trade for 24 years. I do anything and everything I can to support vets and just have fun and introduce what I do.
All right. Excellent. Thank you, Tony. Moshe.
Hi, my name is Moshe Math. I am not a vet. My dad did serve during Korea. Excuse me. I'm involved in a company in the health and wellness field. My reason for coming here is to hopefully be able to find ways of doing good for veterans who may be suffering from various ailments, as well as PTSD, using what they call brain wave treatment through sound, light, and vibration in a zero gravity position combined.
Excellent. All right. I think we've given everybody a chance to introduce themselves, except for our featured speaker. And can we make certain we give the controls over to Kevin to allow him to share his screen if he wants to?
Nope, I don't need to share my screen.
You don't need
I'm
to share
just
your
going to
screen.
talk.
All right, not a problem then. We'll go to who's ever recording this. If you could go to speaker view so that we can get his face on this, so that when we share the recording that we can see you better. How's that sound? All right.
Well, I'm not sure that's a benefit to the group here, but you know, if you insist.
All right, Kevin. Floor is yours. Thank you. Introduce yourself and tell us your story.
Well, thank you, Dennis. First of all, I appreciate the invitation, and I really appreciate what you all do here. You know, large or small group. I suppose, like you all, and many of you, including Moshe, who just introduced himself. The idea of helping vets out is also it's important to a lot of us, even though we might be vets and seems a little bit self-serving. I could start off by saying that, you know, I spent 20 years in the Air Force, and no jokes about that, please. I've got a father who was a Special Forces guy, a brother retired Army, a brother retired Navy, and a brother in the Marines. And each time we get into this sort of banter back and forth, I win. So just want to put you on notice. I actually did have a situation that it was the ultimate comeback, if you will. When I retired in 2000 from the Air Force, I was out at Travis Air Force Base, and for a retirement ceremony, and my dad came out, and all my brothers came out, and frankly, an uncle, he's not even really an uncle. He was one of my dad's closest buddies, who was also a Green Beret in Vietnam with him. And if you all know about the Green Beret, it's really a small sort of alumni, you know, compared to a lot of the others. And so wherever we went, we always, so they almost became like uncles to us. And so he showed up as well. So obviously there was a lot of vet friends there, officers enlisted, pretty nice little group that I was talking to. And when I gave I guess you could say, my retirement speech, and I introduced all of my family, you know, and gave them a very, very nice introduction. I asked them to all stand up. They were in their uniform, even though they were all retired at that point. And I said, as you can see, we have covered all the services with the exception of Coast Guard. And finally, one of us got it right. And the crowd went crazy. And it was really the ultimate comeback. And so they left me alone from that point on and never put me down about being in the Air Force. So, just my story. Listen, I don't really feel like I have this compelling story. I find myself during, Memorial Day, even 4th of July, Veterans Day, all of these sorts of things. I guess you could say, bowing to those who fought, who faced the enemy face to face. I have great respect. I hear some banter out there sometimes about, who's what in the military. I am one of those people that if you spent time in the military and you were discharged honorably, I have a great respect for you. That said, I have enormous respect for those who who felt the body of another person that they were fighting and trying to kill them, and or who took a bullet or who lost a leg. I mean, it's just my personal feelings, and I don't suggest anybody else needs to necessarily feel that way. It's just the way that I feel. So having said that, though, I grew up in a military family. In fact, I tell people, my dad was 26 years in the Army, Green Beret, 3.5 years in Vietnam. I mean, just the, Bronze Star, Purple Hearts, all of that. And I tell people that I felt like, I was more in the military growing up than when I was actually in the military, because he was a tough dude, But I did. I grew up, as a brat, Army brat, and probably was born at, Fort Bragg, Womack Army Hospital. And within 6 months or so, we were, the family was stationed in Bad Tolz, Germany, in the Bavarian Alps, maybe one of the more incredible places. As a matter of fact, about a month ago, I just went there and did some videotaping. It was pretty incredible. I actually should have brought some of that, but in any event, so, my dad, as I said, went to war. He was wounded pretty seriously. He's, he had a very serious parachute accident. I still remember those days. I remember so many times in the morning waking up and hearing my dad put his uniform on and listening to the cardboard uncrinkle, because he had them pressed and so tight. He was the ultimate Army soldier. He really was. He loved his work in the Army. He was actually an incredible musician. Actually, I should say, not so much as a musician as a singer. He was a country singer, and he was just so good. He could have been a star. I don't say that just because he was my dad. He was really that good. But as good as he was, the Army was first for him. He was just the ultimate soldier. So as you can imagine, I grew up watching him, and he was a tough guy, and it was hard sometimes, because growing up, I was a dreamer and a lover and a thinker and a daydreamer, and was lazy, and that just didn't fit the mold. So on the one hand, I struggled as a child because he had different ideas about how I should be. But on the other hand, obviously, once I became an adult, I started to look at that whole scenario differently. So I graduated from high school. He had moved from Fort Bragg to a position in Bowling Green at Western Kentucky. He was an ROTC instructor. He was an officer by that point. And it's interesting. He passed away just, I think, 2021, in April 2021. As a matter of fact, I may have told you, Dennis, his ashes are laying up there in Gallatin, where you are at the National Cemetery. And when we had a funeral for him, it was incredible. The team came down from Clarksville, Special Forces team, gave him 21 gun salute. It was just, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it right now. But what really surprised us was the number of his ROTC students who had learned about it and showed up at the funeral. and came up and told us what he meant to them, how he changed their life in so many different ways. One of them, I think he was he might have been a Silver Star recipient or something like this in Iraq or something like this, and talked about what my dad taught him and these such things. So anyways, I say all that to say then I graduated from high school. I moved up to Bowling Green because I was a musician and singer, and and said to myself, I'm going to move to Nashville and become a recording artist and a star and record albums and be all of that. And I was only there about a day hanging around some of the Nashville musicians when I figured out that as a songwriter, excuse me a sec. As a songwriter and musician and singer, I wasn't even in the ballpark. I mean, I wasn't even in like the parking lot. I was so so not ready to do that. So eventually, that was my dream in life. I grew up dreaming that I would do that, but it just got destroyed when I realized I just didn't have what it took to be that. And I was too young and even immature to realize what it was going to take to get there. So, I just let the dream die. And I was, of course I was sort of a hippie style young man when I got out of high school, and my dad was, I wasn't living with him, but he was on my case to do something with my life. And so I hated him and got mad at him. And I'd said, I'm going to the, damn recruiter's office. And so I'm heading there, and I see the Army, and I said, yeah, I remember my dad used to talk smack about the Air Force. He couldn't stand him. So I'm going in the Air Force. This will piss him off, Little did I know he could have cared less where I went, just do something. So I joined the Air Force, and I'll be honest with you, that changed my life in such a positive way. I immediately adapted to it, of course, having spent so many years just in that culture of the military. So I went in the Air Force in 1979. I started off as, in environmental support. I was an enlisted guy, obviously, and spent several years doing that in, water and waste, and pretty interesting work. I started out at Beale Air Force Base, then went to Frankfurt, spent 5 years at Rhein-Main Air Base. Many of you military people have probably at least passed through there, perhaps. And then I got involved in a group, and I won't stay here, but it was a significant part of my life. I ended up in a group called Tops in Blue. And believe it or not, it's an entertainment group inside of the military that travels the world entertaining the troops for, it kind of has that same similar mission to the Blue Angels or the Thunderbirds, where you travel around and you try to boost the morale of the troops. It is somewhat of a USO show, but it's very, very, very accomplished, very high end. And in fact, later on, the Army created one called the Soldiers Show. And so very, very similar to that. So I spent a few years there, and that's where I met my wife. And probably it was because we were entertainers. Of course, we showed up on the stage with glitter and sequence, and it was this fancy show. And I mean, literally, we'd show up to a theater. Literally, there was I mean, just like a line of, a quarter mile long waiting to get in to see this group. I mean, if you're in the Air Force, you would be familiar with this. It was very, very popular. We always, we did a lot of, heads of state shows, and, and recruitment shows and community relations shows. And so it was very, very high end. And people saw that and admired us. But what they didn't know is we were also the roadies. So we would show up at a venue, let's say at a military base or down in some city, and, set up about 60,000 pounds of equipment, steel toe boots and all these sorts of things. Then we would change, do the show. Then we'd go to a banquet. Then we'd go back to the venue and tear down 60,000 pounds of equipment. And it was probably the hardest job I ever had in my life. But what it did for me more than anything else beyond this beautiful wife that I was able to find there was it taught me about human relations and teamwork and all of these things. It's you really have to understand it to understand how profound it was. But having said that, that led me then to my next part of my career where I got into human relations education and did a lot of work advising commanders about people problems and all these other sorts of things. And then I took a little hiatus, I guess you could say, from my normal job and went into a special duty assignment working for the Defense Intelligence Agency. And so spent 3 years at the U.S. Embassy in Israel, just like right as soon as the first Gulf War ended, where they were sending Scuds and all those other sorts of things. And I like to say that my work in Israel, of course, it's an intel job, but you're also in sort of a military diplomatic role to varying degrees, depending on your work. And that changed my whole view of the world, seeing how things worked behind the scenes. And it was a profound, profound experience that I had. Did that for 3 years, was supposed to go to Hong Kong. But my wife's mother was very ill. So we went back into our sort of the normal Air Force. And then I finished out my career 5 years later, went back into human relations education. And then I retired in 2000. 2000, we moved from Travis Air Force Base to Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And I had thoroughly planned out. Let me stop here real quick and ask Dennis. I just want to make sure I've got the time right here. What is the cutoff for me here?
We have at least another 18 minutes that we
okay.
can go. So
we're good. Am I on track for what?
Yes, absolutely.
You're hoping that we hear.
The whole idea here is not that there's anything templated. This is your story. I want you to be able to tell your story. And, with, I guess, with a focus and emphasis on what, your service was and what it meant to you and how it's affected your life up to this point. And you're doing wonderfully.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Well, interesting enough, I on the one hand, I loved almost every minute of my career, my 20-year career. I did work in a couple of different, purple suit organizations. So I got really familiar with what the Army did and their culture, and Marines, obviously at the embassy, the Marines, I do have a funny story about the Marines. It won't be funny maybe to the Marine here because he already knows this, but in the embassy system, the defense attaché system, we wear civilian clothes most of the time, and you live on the economy, and you're in the embassy system, so you sort of have an attitude about that you're, you feel like you're the cream of the cream and all this kind of stuff. And I remember, the work I did, it was I wouldn't necessarily, it was the hardest work that I did, but we worked so hard. I mean, it was just constant work. I mean, you go get in at 6:30 sometimes, and you'd work till 1:00, like crazy, until Washington woke up, and then you started work over again. So you never knew what time you were actually going to leave. But in any event, I remember, I'm a personable guy. I like to get to know people. I love making relationships and this, that, and the other. And so I got to know the Marines pretty well. And I always told them to call me Kevin. I mean, again, we were civilian clothes, all this kind of stuff. I think I was the E5 or E6 at the time. And so one of the Marines was bringing around a new security guard. And the guy came up and introduced me. He said, hey, this is Sergeant McNulty, or maybe I said, yeah, it's Kevin. He said, this is Lance Corporal so-and-so. And so I said, how you doing? What's your last, no, what is it? I said, what's your first name? He said, Lance Corporal. I was like, okay, gotcha. It paused me for a second. I said, I got to remember this. It's a different culture. But so I really had the great opportunity of working in a lot of different, with again, in a purple suit organization with a lot of different of the military services. And it was just fascinating to be able to do that. So in any event, I retired in 2000. We moved here to Murfreesboro. I had planned pretty diligently that when I got out, I was going to become a public speaker. I was going to become a consultant and a coach, primarily in the soft skills arena. I mean, this sort of my business, personal, professional development. I have been studying these sorts of things. I mean, independently studying for 20 years or so. So you know, I don't know if anybody can ever be an expert in human relations and soft skills and personal development, but you know, if you could say that, I really felt I was in that arena 40 years, and I had done a lot of training, done a lot of public speaking, done a lot of these sorts of things already throughout my career, primarily in the human relations work, but also at the embassy. I got into a, you know, I was part of the International NCO Association and became the president, did a lot of speeches and that sort of thing. So all of that to say, and again, remember what I said about Thompson Blue, spent 4 years there. You know, just to backtrack on that a little bit, I mean, you pretty much spent 24/7 with these people on a bus, traveling. Very very rarely were you not around them, and working really, really hard. And, you know, if you want to learn how to build a team and get around people, you know, not to mention these are all musicians with massive egos, you know, so there's an extra piece there that you have to deal with. And I got really good at it. You know, I understood how these, you know, the forming, storming, all these sorts of things happen in teams. And I could almost calculate how it would work when a group got together and spent that much time together, that tired, that much labor, that you definitely go through these phases. But if you manage it right, you come out on the other end on a really in a different place. And I don't want to compare this to like the special operations people, but I think SEAL teams, you know, Green Berets, anybody that's part of a really strong, tight knit group, you know, can talk about these things. And again, certainly the work was different, and I wouldn't compare the two in terms of the struggles that you have to go through the work, but the concept's the same. The principles are the same about how you deal with each other and these sorts of things. And it was, by the way, obviously it was very multicultural, multiracial. And so it was just brought a whole different dynamic to my mind in how I could do my work. So I get out, I planned very diligently to do this. We moved to Murfreesboro. You know, I'm on E7 retirement pay. My wife, who was also, by the way, I'd love for her to come on and tell her story. She's got an amazing story too. She spent 10 years in the Air Force. But she had got out when we had our first child in 95, 94, no, 95. And decided to be a stay-at-home mom, but she had 10 years behind her, both in as a military active duty person, but also in the embassy. She did some work in there because she'd already had her, you know, clearance and this, that, and the other. So, but when we moved here to Murfreesboro, you know, she's going to start so after a couple of years of our first child, she said, Kevin, I don't want to go back to work, but I need to do something a little more stimulating, you know, just to keep my brain working, you know, and so she started teaching music, teaching piano to young kids, yada, yada, out of our home. And so she did that for a few years. When we moved to Murfreesboro, she was going to start up her piano teaching business, and I was going to become a consultant. Obviously, we're working for ourselves independently. And I don't know, somehow in my head, I thought, you know, we could get this up and running in about a year. So we saved money, we downsized, we paid off as much bills as we could. And probably about 3 months into the process, I was like, oh crap, we might be in trouble here. You know, I haven't even begun, and we're 3 months into this, and time kept moving faster and faster. And the closer we got to sort of that year time, because that's sort of how we budgeted things out, the closer we got, the more nervous I got. So now we're probably at the 9-month mark. Not much is happening, really not much at all. I mean, well, first thing I discovered is I didn't have a clue about business. But here was the other thing, Dennis, that's very important. Remember, I spent 20 years, or let's say 19 years as a brat in the military environment, most of the times on a military base, and then 20 years in the Air Force. The one thing that I figured out was I have no clue how to be a civilian. I don't even know what that's like. People would say human resources management. I'd be like, what is that? And that was the business I was in, you know, going into. And so I discovered not only do I not know how to run a business, I didn't have even today, 24 years later, I'm still in business, I'm happy to say. But it's still quite the struggle because I didn't grow up with the mentality of what business is like. So I have to really work at being a good business person. So having said that, 9-month mark came around and my concern turned to stress and a little bit of anxiety. And the closer we got, really, it was the closer we got to running out of money is what it was. The more fear that set in. I was just, in my heart and soul, I was like, I got to do this. I don't want to work for somebody else. I want to do what I love to do. It's my only chance. I really did. I thought this was your one chance to make this transition, because I knew that, as humans are, that if I went back into a job, it was over. We'd get comfortable with the pay and the comfort and all that kind of stuff, and I would not have that sort of transition to make again. That's the way I thought about it. So in the end, as we got closer and closer, I'll never forget, it was October 2020, October 2000, excuse me, October 2001, I think it was, or maybe 2000, I can't remember. Something happened and I went into this bizarre depression and anxiety. And I'm talking about the kind that put me on my back, because all of a sudden discs in my back started blowing up. I couldn't hardly walk. And I was a totally healthy, pretty good shape guy. I couldn't walk. I couldn't think. I couldn't stop crying. I couldn't stop feeling like the world was coming to the end. And it was just as pitiful as you can possibly imagine. And I didn't expect it. And it really caught me off guard. And I didn't want to admit it. And I didn't want to capitulate. I didn't want to do whatever I needed to do to get better. I just, if you've ever suffered with depression, particularly, it's surprising how hard it is to get up from the couch. It's surprising how hard that is, even for military people. And I know I might, to some degree, I might be talking to preaching to the choir here. So this went on for a couple of months, and my wife, God bless her soul, she started studying depression. She started asking people, just trying to learn about it and what to do and this, that, and the other. And she learned a few things. And the first thing one of the big things that she learned, she said, in essence, you got to keep moving. You got to do something. You can't just lay there in your miseries. You got to do something. So what she did, she started talking to me, and she said, Kevin, and I relied on her to be my eyes, my perception, my comfort, all of these sorts of things. And she said, Kevin, here's what you're going to do. Not here's what you should do. Here's what you're going to do. Tomorrow, you're going to take your laptop. You're going over to Starbucks or whatever it was. Maybe it was Panera. And she said, you're going to open your laptop and you're just going to start typing. I said, typing what? She said, just typing whatever is in your head. Just type. And so I did. I went there. I started typing mostly just how I felt and what was going on. I'm sure I used some big F-bombs in my writings, all kinds of stuff. I'm pretty sure I cursed at God. I did everything that you can imagine, but I kept doing that every single day. And started to feel a little bit better. And then after about 30 days of doing that, it was at a Panera, because right across the parking lot was one of those office depots place or whatever. And I put what I was writing into I'm going to ask one more time, what is the actual time that I have until?
Well, we end this at the top of the hour, and
okay.
We usually like to leave, about 10 minutes for question and answer. So
you got it. I'll do it. I'm good. I was just making sure that I'm on track here. So I put it on a little Fire Stick, took it over to Max. I printed it out and I took it home to my wife, and I said, I'm starting to feel a little bit better. I just thought that, and I really shared my appreciation to her, to being honest with me and pushing me out the door. And so she took that night and read it, and she got up the next morning and she said, Kevin, you've been talking about for a few years to write a book, and here it is. I was like, what are you talking about? She said, it's pretty jumbled. She said, but what I'm seeing here is two things. I'm hearing you express yourself very deeply about what's going on in your head. She said, but you may not realize you're coaching yourself at the same time, because you have spent the last 20, she knew this, 20, 25 years studying personal development, in human relations, in decision, in all of these soft skills. And she said, you've been mind dumping that too, whether you realize it or not. And I was like, wow, because I didn't go back and read it. And she said, you also told this story 3 times. I said, okay. And so I did. I went back and read it, and she said, you got to keep going, do this. And so I kept writing, finally ended up with a manuscript. Then I started, okay, I'm going to turn this into a book. And my lack of understanding and knowledge about writing a book was not there either, because I hadn't planned to write a book. I was just brain dumping. And and I say that the manuscript, if you want to call that I had at that point, it was many dozens of pages. I don't know how many it was. I'm talking about full document pages. It was like, what I had there was like taking, like, let's just say that you're a fanatic about Christmas lights, but every year you just dump them all in a box, and then you come around the next year to take them out of the box and they're all tangled up. That's what it was like. There was a lot of lights in there, but it was so tangled up. And so what I did is I then reached out to an editor and these other sorts of things. Actually, was an interesting guy who wrote about self-publishing and writing, all these such things. And I called him up, and surprisingly, he was a very popular guy in the National Speakers Association, all these other things. I called him up, and he said, and I explained my situation to him, and he was really a grumpy old guy too. And he said, wow, you novice writers, you're all alike. You jump in and you don't think about anything, and this, that, and the other. I said, yes, sir, you're right. I know. I just, I didn't go through the whole story. He said, all right, I'm going to send you something and just, do it. I said, all right, I will. So what he sent me was this sort of a guide of how to write a book. And one of the first things that he suggested in this guide was, he said, to write out your chapters, not to write the chapters, to title your chapters with even with nothing in them, just what you think that you want to say. And I did that, and amazing how things changed. And now my whole life was coming back. And all I did is, it was pretty painful still, is I just took information I was reading. As I saw it, I said, yep, that goes in this chapter, and yep, that goes in this chapter. And I just kept going. So I started shaping. It was still quite a mess, but then I got an editor, and she straightened me out. And then I published the book. It actually took me almost 6 years to write it. But I published it in 2012. It's called The Gap Between Two Worlds: How to Turn Major Life Transitions into Personal Growth Experiences. And may I say, I think I know Dennis's mindset about this. I don't know anybody else's, but even in the book, man, I give God the glory for this thing. It's wow, I'm getting a little choked up here. It was so therapeutic. But if you ever think that you're in control, or you know what you're supposed to do with things, I never saw this coming. I just never saw it in a million years. So I continued on and started working on my practice a little bit more. I got better. One of the good things is I had really, really good human relations skills, got to know people. And I'll tell you one other quick story before I close out here. And that is that I finally got my first gig. It was around 2000. I think around 2004 or something, first client, if you will. It was kind of a contract deal with a career coaching institute out of New York City. It was a pretty big deal, but after I started working with them, I became their golden boy, and they loved what I did. Like you all know, I'm only 40 something years old, but you spend 20 years in the military, you show up some pretty serious skills. I don't care what field you're in. You're a broad thinker. You're good, all these sorts of things. So I became their golden boy. And then they asked me if I would just sort of supervise or manage a team of consultants or coaches, again, these were like career coaches and this, that, and the other. And I said, sure. And so then they started showing me behind the curtain, because I was a part of the management team, and I realized that these, what they didn't know about military folks is that by and large, we do actually understand this word integrity. And what I saw about them is that they were just, they were kind of, I guess, to put it politely, they were, cheating some of their consultants and coaches. And I confronted them in a very professional way, but suddenly, instantly, almost, I now became not their golden boy, but their, whatever, the black sheep of the family, if you want to use that moniker. And I ran into I started having real serious problems with them. I then consulted a good friend of mine who I played tennis with, who was in the music industry and knew the doggy dot world. I sat down with him. I said, Rick, you got to help me with this. I don't know what to do. He said, here's what his words to me. We're sitting in the tennis court after the match. And he said, Kevin, I've been in the music industry for yada, yada years. And he was a music executive. He said, it's a dog eat dog world. Here's one thing that I learned. He said, and here's my advice to you. He said, call these people up, and I'll be polite about it. He said, and tell them to go F themselves. I said, what, Rick? It's my only client. He said, Kevin, maybe you didn't understand what I said. Call them up and tell them to go F themselves, and then go out and find only good clients, only people that are worth working with. And I did that, believe it or not. I did it. And I kept, and as soon as I did this, and back to my point that I was making earlier, I'm literally sitting at this desk. I called him up. I started off very polite and professional and just tell him that I'm just going to, go away very nicely. And then this executive started attacking me. And that's when I got to the go F yourself, pay me my money and I'm done. And we screamed at each other, and I hung the phone up and I dropped back literally in this chair. And I go, oh my God, what did I just do? I had two young daughters and a wife, by the way, 2 young daughters. And within a minute, I promise you, it was not more than a minute, and I'm not exaggerating, my Outlook dinged me. I'm back here. Oh my God, what did I just do? Ding. I opened it up. It was a person who I had been in contact with 6 months earlier. And it said, the email said, Kevin, give me a call. I've got some work for you. I am not exaggerating this. Now you tell me who's in control. All of that said, here it is, 2024, and I've stayed in business, a lot of ups and downs, but the military has been my fallback mentality, and God's been my guide, and I'm done.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. One of the things I'd love to be able to do here is to ask you and to put into the comments not only ways for people to reach you, but maybe a link to your book and to your business website as well. So we can either use it ourselves or share it with our networks. I'd like to mention to everybody else on here to do the same for yourself, because we'd love to encourage folks to make connections outside of this meeting. Yeah, thank you so much for telling us your story. I have a few questions myself, but I want to open it up to the audience first. Marcia, Tony, Moshe, what questions do you have for Kevin?
So
Jump in, the water's warm.
So you've been doing consulting?
Yes.
For 24 years?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And you just primarily just been a single member LLC or sole member?
Yep. I'm actually incorporated. It's an S corp, but
Nice.
I've had employees, I've had consultants, but decided that I don't want to supervise anybody. So now everything I do it's a solopreneur. My wife's, my quasi partner, she's the one that I talk things through, and we make decisions about these things. And then everything else is pretty much outsourced, if, graphic, whatever. So yes, I started as a consultant doing sort of, speaking, training, of course, coaching was, just really kind of starting to raise its, but as we moved along, I then moved more into doing workshops and now coaching. So probably at least 50% or more is really personal, professional development coaching, whether it be leadership or soft skills, human dynamics, these sorts of things.
Are you doing mostly B2B or B2G? Or
I'm doing mostly business to business, but I'm trying to slowly get away from that. I'm trying to get 95% of my work online here virtually, so that we can, I'm not going to retire. I don't have any desire to retire, but I am 65. And so I'm just going to try to put myself in a position where I don't have to travel to businesses. I hate chasing business. So I'm hoping that I can set up systems where the business comes to me and I'm working really more on individual, like not individuals, but with groups. So so I wouldn't go to a company like, for instance, if I do coaching, oftentimes it's either one-on-one with maybe executives or managers, or it's a group within an organization. What I want to get away from is that I want to set up, this, do you want to be a better leader? We're going to get together once a month and we're going to talk about how to be a better leader, and we're going to mastermind and learn and this, that, and the other. And that's the way that I want to approach this so that I can keep traveling.
You like to be like a fractional?
Say again?
Like in a fractional company where you just
Not sure what you mean there.
so like they have fractional CFOs, CMOs, CIOs, and they just have a bunch of leaders that work for the company. The company goes out and sells the jobs, and then they say, "Oh, we've got this person in this area
Well,
doing this."
I really haven't looked so much into that, but really it's probably just more along the lines of setting up a well, like for instance, I'm just very briefly, I'm trying to set up what's called mastermind groups, and so in that scenario, I would invite anybody around. Frankly, it could be around the world, but let's just say around the U.S., where where I create this mastermind and I facilitate the groups. So it might be small business people or executives that meet once a month. And the idea is that they bring their problems and issues to the table, and you sit around with your peers and you solve problems. So I become the facilitator a little bit, but again, come from anywhere. But I have obviously get this moving and get the invitations and find this, that, and the other, which is as easy as it sounds.
Yeah. Do you mentor on karate at all?
On what?
Veterati.
Nope.
You can sign up on there as a mentor, and you probably could get some leads and stuff there. That's for veterans. They can call in for an hour and talk to an expert.
That's a great idea. I've worked with a lot of veterans, and I love doing. Yeah.
And then there's this platform called OWL, OWW. I think it's 2 L's. It's free too, but you could also set up a account on there where people call you and get consulting or whatever for you, and they pay by the minute basically.
Wow.
It's an app.
Yeah.
And I believe
That's very, very nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love, and I'm open to working with any vets. I don't charge vets, I mean, depending on the scenario, if it's dealing with, them transitioning into civilian worlds or trying to get started in these sorts of things. I'm not looking to make money off of veterans, but if they have an established system like Veterati, I'll go there and see what.
Yeah. OWL is OWWLL.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that, Tony.
Yeah. And you can even become a brand ambassador for them too. And I believe I think it's Jason. I can't remember if he's a veteran or a firefighter or first responder. He's one of those two, either veteran or first responder. But you literally can set up an account, and then people can call you, and they pay by the minute to talk to you.
That's terrific. Thank you so much for that information. Yeah, appreciate it. Any other questions? I'm happy to any question. I don't care.
Do you have any thoughts or questions here for Kevin?
No, I don't have anything.
All right, thank you. Hey, Moshe, how about yourself?
I have a couple questions, but I think I'll try to save it for another time because there isn't much time left for today. But thank you.
All right. Well, Kevin, I actually have a question here. I noticed that you talked about that point where you left the service and you were almost to the point of being out of money, and you fell into this deep depression. I think that I know for myself, it didn't happen exactly that same way, but I experienced something similar. If you're thinking of, what would you say, having gone through that, what sort of advice would you give to a veteran who's experiencing that, or somebody who is thinking about leaving the service to prepare them for that possibility?
Wow, that's a great question. I will say, and I did take advantage of the VA, and I did start seeing a therapist and all those sorts of things. So I'll echo a former client of mine who says, I recommend therapy to everybody, and so I do, so, you do have to, I do, when I talk to people about this, I say, don't just fall into the first therapist you get. Some of the, half the therapists I run into are crazy themselves. So find you a good therapist that works for you that you can resonate with. And I did that. So that's one, reach out there to that professional help, especially if you're a veteran and can get that, from the VA or whatever the case might be. If not, it might be, to spend a little money would be worth the time. Again, if you can find a good therapist, adjust, one of the tricks, one of the methods is just to get that stuff out of your head. That's part of the problem. Just all locked up in there, and it starts to come together. It depends on your way of thinking, but people then deal with it in different ways. Some don't maybe fall into this deep depression, but they turn all of their attention to their work, and then the rest of their life falls apart around them. So go find somebody that you can talk to. Number two, I like to say, short of a therapist, or even if you have a therapist, you got to find you what I refer to in the book, a guide. It so happened to be that my wife was the perfect guide. And what I mean by guide is a person that you can be vulnerable with and walk up to them and say, like, if you were my guide, Dennis, I would say, Dennis, man, I'm really in a bad spot here. And you say, well, what's going on? I'm saying, well, this, that, and the other. And I would say, I just need you to help me with my perceptions. Is it bad as it looks? And Dennis goes, it's not that bad, Kevin. It's just your perception. You're stressed right now. So that guide helps you think. They help you perceive what's in front of you, because your perceptions, and you all know this, they will absolutely be your worst enemy. You look at something and you just think, in a depressive state, you're like, oh, my life's over. And my wife would say, Kevin, it's not even close. And I'd be like, you're sure? So that's the other thing. And then the other thing that I think is really, really important, especially for the veterans thinking about getting out, but certainly for any veteran, is you have to develop some kind of a vision about where you're going. Depression, anxiety, frustration, all of these things in this context are almost always happen. Well, certainly a big contributing factor is that you have no idea, no clarity about what you're trying to achieve here. And so it contributes to what I call the spiral. You get into the gap. So the gap represents the old world. This is where you are or where you used to be, and the new world. And in between those two worlds is the gap. Inside the gap itself, in the middle, if you want to, what would you say in the middle is what I call the foggy zone. So you leave the military, you know nothing about the civilian world. The foggy zone becomes those things that make the other side, that make the new world difficult to see. Things like, even practical things like the education that you need, but also things like anxiety, depression, frustration. It doesn't matter what it is, being busy. You can't see the other side because you get inside of this dark place, and then you become disoriented and you start moving all kinds. You try all sorts of things. If you have a vision and you have a guide, the guide says, Kevin, your goal was to be this and to do this, and it's that way. Just keep walking. Let's keep moving. But you have at least a sense of direction. If you don't, you will get caught in this whirlwind that will not only exacerbate situation, it'll take you right down. And by the way, many people go back to the old world. So they may not go back to their military life because they can't, but they go back to the same work in the civilian sector, which is nothing wrong with that, but it's work that they didn't want to do. Only difference is they're comfortable with it. Yep.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Kevin. I appreciate you coming on today. A great featured guest here. I appreciate that so much. I do want to invite your wife to connect with us to get her on the schedule. I want to invite everyone who is a veteran to consider coming on and telling your veteran story. Connect with us. We'll let you tell your story as you want it to be told. I do want to mention that next week our guest is John Sharp. He spent 7 years as an enlisted man in the Air Force, and he has been for a very long time now with the Richmond VA Medical Center in Richmond, Virginia. He is currently the director of spinal cord injury and disorders rehabilitation therapy services there.
Wow.
I'm very much looking forward to his being with us. I invite you and ask you all to actually share this with your networks, so that, you know, we want this to be able to we want more people to know about it, and we want more people to participate, and we want more stories to be told. So that's the bottom line, really, for all of this. Lastly, I wasn't able to get my Word software to work, but I do have the link to our event in San Diego on August 10th. I just put it in the chat. Please share that with folks, especially those who may be in a position to attend or to support us. I checked it just as I was trying to pull this together, and we actually did get my first sponsor to pony up the money, and so we got a little bit of money in there, so that's good. We need a little bit more. So anyone that can help with that would be fantastic. Appreciate it. Kevin, did you have something else you wanted to say?
Just real quick, I would like to just let people know about my podcast, and
Yes.
I just put it in there.
Okay.
It's about personal growth and these sorts of things. I talk about these sorts of things. So I mean, obviously, it's free, and I would love for you to go subscribe. The first one is a YouTube podcast, but I also have them on Spotify and Apple. And if you go to that link tree, link that I just put in there, you can find all the other venues that I put in there. So I would love people to go and subscribe and learn and listen. Yeah.
So for everyone else on here, if you have not put your contact information in, please do so. I always save these the chats, and like I said, I do suggest and recommend that folks make connections outside of this. I think that's always a good thing when we can make a connection and learn about each other, and then what we can do to support one another. So we are past our hour. I thank you all for being here. I look forward to you joining next week. And if you haven't been a featured speaker yet, look forward to having you be a featured speaker with us. God bless you all.
God bless you. Thank you, Dennis.
Bye.